Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are MythVision.
Dr. Robert M.Price. I have a 2-in-1 question from an Israel-only proponent. David King goes by DK Channel on Facebook, and he says, what does Dr. Price believe Paul is talking about in Romans 9:24 through 29? The Israel-only stance is that Paul is explaining his Gentile believers are the scattered of Ephraim. Second question into this, Romans 11:25 through 26, which the polemics from Romans 9 onward to 11. Romans 11:25 through 26 says, Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved. Israel only believes Paul is speaking about the elect from the scattered of Ephraim being the full number of Gentiles spoken of here. That would be why Paul says, and in this way all Israel will be saved. When the full elect number of the scattered of Ephraim are regathered, then the elect will be together to survive the judgment coming soon in AD 70. Does Dr. Price agree with that interpretation?
Well, for one thing, wouldn't they be better staying where they are if they want to avoid the horrors of 70 AD? I mean, but the idea that the Gentiles are the lost tribes of Israel or Ephraim, northern Israel, that only makes sense. The idea of the full number of Israel, meaning everybody he's just talked about, the ones he calls Jews and Gentiles and so on. If you already had reason to believe that the Gentiles likely meant that, and I just cannot see that that is not a function of this theology. It seems to me there's no reason to make that equation, and that it makes it impossible to make any reference to non-Jews, non-Israelites using the term Gentile. It just seems to me it's a kind of code that has to be read into the Bible rather than read out of it. What was the thing in Romans 9?
Yeah, so Romans 9 verses 24 through 29. And if you want, I can read it out loud, or if you want to read it.
Yeah, might as well.
So Romans 9:24 through 29. And they believe that the Israel-only stance is that Paul's explaining his Gentile believers are the scattered of Ephraim. 9:24 through 29.
Let's see. How about starting with 22 so we get a complete sentence. What if God, wanting to show his anger and to evidence his power, with great patience endured the agents that deserve wrath and have been prepared for destruction, so that he might make known the wealth of his glory to the recipients of mercy, whom previously he prepared for glory, even us whom he has called not only from among the Jews, but also from among the Gentiles. So too, he says in Hosea, I will call those who were not my people, and her who was not loved, my beloved. And in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they will be called sons of the living God. Isaiah, too, exclaims regarding Israel, even though the number of Israel's sons were as the sand of the sea, only a remnant will be saved, for he will... What is this? A weird footnote here. Oh, some texts go on. For he will finish the work and round it out in righteousness. For thoroughly and with dispatch, the Lord will execute his decree on the earth, end quote. As Isaiah further foretold, unless the Lord of hosts had left us offspring, we would have become like Sodom and would have been made like Gomorrah. Now, where's the passage end?
29.
Yeah, that's that.
So he says the Israel-only stance is that Paul is explaining his Gentile believers here are the scattered of Ephraim.
Yeah, this is certainly no explanation of that. What in here even implies that or is amenable to that?
I think when you go to Hosea, also, the Hosea 6:1, what does Paul say? A reference in Hosea, what was that reference? And I'll pull it up.
1:10 or 2:23?
Is it in Hosea 1:10? Hosea 1:10 or 2:23? Okay, so Hosea 1 verse 10 says, "Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it is said to them, 'You are not my people,' it will be said to them, 'You are the sons of the living God.' And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together." So this is very interesting. And they will appoint for themselves one leader. So what Israel only is suggesting is when you look at the reference that Paul references, notice he only references verse 10. Okay? In Hosea 1 verse 10. But look, Paul never mentions verse 11. And so it would make their case very strong if he said Hosea 1 verse 10 and 11, hint, hint, wink, wink, this is who my Gentile audience is. Because here, in verse 10, he says, "Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it is said to them, 'You are not my people,' it will be said to them, 'You are the sons of the living God.'" Now, what they'll say is, "You are not my people." Well, who are the "you are not my people"? Well, when you look in verse 11 of Hosea verse 1, or chapter 1, "And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will appoint for themselves one leader, and they will go up from the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel." So it appears that this reference used by Paul, I.O. will go to the context of Hosea 1 and say, hey, this is talking about Judah and Israel, the northern and the southern tribes. And so this is where they're suggesting the Gentiles are the...
You mean in Hosea?
In Hosea.
Yeah, too bad we're concerned about the argument of the author of Romans.
Right.
You can't assume that they have in view the point the original text was making. There's always this opportunistic garnishing of the text with wording that would fit it even out of context.
Yeah, and that's the one issue that I have. Like, don't get me wrong, if it was all really connected, we wouldn't have this problem. I don't even know if this would be a debate. In fact, I think Israel only would be one of the earliest movements that are going on in the scene where this sect might even have took over the church, but I doubt it would have been as popular, especially in a Greco-Roman world. It probably would have went extinct, and we wouldn't even have Christianity.
Like the Ebionites, which pretty much did for that reason.
They were Jewish only, but you said Hosea 2:23. "I will sow her for myself in the land. I will also have compassion on her who had not obtained compassion, and I will say to those who were not my people, 'You are my people,' and they will say, 'You are my God.'" But that doesn't say anything in the context of Hosea of that. Now, the second part of his question had to do with Romans 11:25 through 26. And he did put the quote here, but I don't know the translation. Romans 11:25 through 26. It's Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in, and in this way all Israel will be saved.
Yeah, I want you, brothers, I want you not to be ignorant of this secret. Partial insensibility has come over Israel until the full number of the Gentiles come in, and thus Israel will be saved. As it is written, from Mount Zion a deliverer will come. He will turn away ungodliness from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I have taken away their sins. Hi, kitty cat. How you doing? I got a vicious big white cat here. Hello, sweetheart. Yeah, it just seems to me that you're introducing like for instance, looking just earlier in the chapter, in verse 13, I'm speaking to you Gentiles for the very reason that I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I take pride in my ministry, trying if possible to rouse my own race to jealousy and save some of them. For if the rejection on their part means the world's reconciliation, what must their acceptance mean but life from the dead? If the first piece of dough is holy, so is the whole lump, and if the root is holy, so are the branches. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in, and are sharing the rich root of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches, and if you do boast, remember that you are not supporting the root. Instead, the root supports you. You will reply, the branches have been broken off so that I may be grafted in. Well said. Though through lack of faith they were broken off, and through faith you remain in place. Be not haughty, but stand in awe, for if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. So consider God's kindness and rigor. On the one hand, his rigor applied to those who failed, and on the other hand, God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness, else you too will be cut away. Besides, if they do not persist in their unbelief, if they do not persist in their unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. And if you have been cut from a naturally wild olive tree and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, then how much more readily will these natural branches be grafted into their own original tree? And so on. I just don't see what possible reason there is to read in that people left over from the Assyrian exile are in view here.
Yeah, or any other exile other than I found it kind of interesting there, the whole grafting in concept. He just talked about the branch. He's talking about grafting back in the natural branches. And to me, it's like, look, he can graft in the Jews. He can graft in the people of their own race back, but they're not. It's almost like they're getting cut off. And he's allowing these people who are not natural, that are wild. Now, they'll say wild because, hey, they ended up getting tainted out there in the wilderness.
If there was any reason to identify them that way, you have to read that in. Gentile, Gentile, Gentile. Since when did that mean diaspora Israelites? They're just making it up as they go.
Well, that's a good question. I'd like a book to be written on this subject matter, because then you could really grasp all of their points. You know what I mean? But
hello, kitty.
But yeah, so this full number concept comes up, and then they go to Revelation 7 and suggest the full number. This kind of thing happens often in the discussions, but that was their question. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on with that?
I think there's something in 1 Peter that is interesting about this, if I can find the darn thing. Let's see.
1 Peter 1?
Yeah, 2 actually.
Okay. Let's see. Come to him, a living stone, rejected by men, it is true, but chosen by God and precious, and be built up as living stones into a spiritual house, a dedicated priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices that through Jesus Christ are acceptable to God. It is therefore contained in Scripture, see, I place in Zion a chosen, precious cornerstone, and he who believes in him will never be put to shame. To you then who believe, he is precious, but to the unbelieving, the stone which the builders rejected has become the main cornerstone, and a stone to trip over and a rock to make them fall. They stubbed their toes because they disbelieved the message.
They were destined for this. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his acquisition, so that you may proclaim the perfections of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. You who once were no people, but are now the people of God, who once experienced no mercy, but have now received mercy. I implore you, dear friends, as aliens and exiles, to keep from gratifying fleshly desires, such as war against the soul. Conduct yourselves well among the Gentiles, so that although they may defame you as criminals, they may see your good works and glorify God in the day of visitation. So you're living among the Gentiles, among the Israelites? It just seems absurd to me.
Well, I think it's interesting that what some of the things they do, and I get why, but it with the ideas that they have preconceived ideas. Death is in Genesis is not literal death.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Right.
Let's just play ventriloquism with the Bible.
Right. I just want to give you the general gist of the ideas here is that in that way, if death is covenantal, then salvation and resurrection could also possibly be that too. But here you mentioned in verse 9 in 1 Peter 2, you are a chosen race, okay? A royal priesthood, a holy nation. All these are Israel concepts, if you will.
But the point is, can Gentiles get in on this?
Right.
And the idea that Gentiles are survivors from the Assyrian conquest, get out of here. It's just so arbitrary. You could say, well, he's really talking about Martians who have been among us for centuries. And I mean, it doesn't say it, but there's no reason to, that shouldn't make any difference. It just seems crazy, as if you said, well, there's a fourth person of the Trinity, and you have to understand that to make sense of it, which means to make our sense of it, for our system to work. It just seems totally contrived, just ventriloquism.
So when, just on that question, before we end this video, all Israel will be saved, right? Romans 11, that was talking about the fullness of the Gentiles will come in, and then all Israel shall be saved. What do you think that means, all Israel shall be saved? Because they'll suggest the all Israel is the inclusive of the Gentiles.
The point of it seems to me to be, okay, right now it's only a remnant of Jews who believe because God has actually put them on hold, because he needs them to be on the sidelines to provide people like Paul with an opportunity to preach to the Gentiles. And once that's done, Jews will see what an amazing miracle this is. I guess they were right. Let's join up too. And then it won't just be a remnant anymore. All Jews will believe. This is how. The result will be exactly the opposite of the way it seems now. Otherwise, I just don't see what the heck sense it would make.
I'll send you the article.
I'm so annoyed with this stuff. I don't really want to pursue it further.
Yeah, no, Jason Staples. He's not an Israel only guy, but they do go to him to look at this. And I actually want to interview the guy. He's a believer, which I'm actually, hoping he'll come on the channel because he knows. We poke at the Bible in a way, but not trying to be facetious. We're trying to show you guys that, look, it's not one size fits all book. But Jason Staples, he's written something on this, and I'd like to get him on there. Maybe I can get you to check out his article at some point. But thank you, Dr. Bob. Join our Patreon.
We are MythVision.